Welcome back to Libertalia Game Supply. This week we're going to take a look at our Water Runic deck, our Yuumi Control Runic deck. The idea here is that we're just creating that lockdown with Karyushin and Yuumi, and just sitting on that, trying to control the board while we're slowly milling out our opponent. And really, once you start getting your resources built up, that becomes a very fast mill out. So it's just the first couple turns you're really trying to control and then going for it. So we got triple Karyushin. So either player can only control one non-water monster. For you, that doesn't matter because your only non-water monster is going to be that extra deck fusion monster that you're summoning off of your Runics. Outside of that, everything else is water. For your opponent, you're just trying to lock them down from being able to put a bunch of material on board and make something big, some big link monsters that are going to give you problems. Then we got double electric Jellyfish. This thing's pretty clutch. It stops monster and spell effects, and then it gains 600 attack. That's only while Yuumi's on the field, so that kind of sucks. But obviously, if the deck is working the way you intended, Yuumi is on the field, and it creates a nice extra layer of control. So it stops like a Harpy's Feather Duster, Raigeki, even though nobody's playing that. Like any big blowout spells, like big board breakers that could put you in trouble, this thing will negate them. And then monster effects that could be annoying. So Halifibrax, you can just stop those types of combos right there. No access code for you, that sort of thing. And then Doom Kraken, just one step down in control from there also. So you can bounce one of your water monsters and one of your opponent's monsters can get destroyed, and then this thing gets special summoned. So you would just bounce probably, well, obviously only these two. But if you had a choice, always leave the Karyushin. But if you do not, on your next turn, assuming you pop the right thing with your Doom Kraken, you distribute it to summon your Karyushin out again. So it's just an additional level of control there. For the Runics, we got triple Fountain. So this is the heart and soul of your Runic engine. It allows you to activate your Runic quick play spells from your hand. Also, when a quick play spell is activated, one time in your turn when one of your Runic quick play spells is activated, you can you can choose up to 3 of your Runics from your graveyard, put them on the bottom of your deck in whatever order, and then draw that same number of cards. And so it just starts recycling all of the Runic spells that you want. So even if you have to burn a few that you don't need or don't really want to see again, you have the option to just leave them in the graveyard and just keep recycling the ones you do need. So 3 of those, super necessary. And then for the Runic quick play spells, they all do the same thing for their second effect. So they all will special summon a Runic extra deck monster into your extra monster zone. All of them do that, all the quick play spells. Their first effects will all be different. So like this one that we're looking at, Runic Destruction, pops a spell or trap, and then it mills 4 cards off your opponent's deck. So they all do something different for their first effect, and then they all mill a different number of cards. So we'll just make note of that. But keep in mind that they also all are a special summon as well. So Destruction pops spell and traps. This one pops special summon monsters, and then mills 2. This is Flashing Fire, Freezing Curses, negates an effect, and then mills 3. Runic Tip searches a Runic spell, and then it mills for 1. So even though it only mills 1, this is like probably one of the best Runic cards in the deck, just because it's like a blank check for whichever one you think you need for the situation that you're in. So obviously you have a Runic spell that can handle just about any type of a situation being thrown at you. So having this just lets you have access to the out for that, like at any time. Deceit is not a quick play spell. This is your continuous spell. You only play the one because you have plenty of ways to get it back out of the graveyard. But each time a quick play spell is activated, banish the top card of your opponent's deck. And it does it multiple times per turn. So like assuming you're maxing out your Fountain each turn with the 3, like activating 3 and then shuffling 3 back, you're also milling an additional 3. So you can, like between these 2 cards, if you're able to activate 3 of something, you're probably milling like 25% of your opponent's deck or more in a turn, depending on which Runic spells you got. So this thing's super, super good. But like I said, just 1 because you can get it back pretty easy. Double Slumber, this thing got cut down to 2 from 3 just because its effect is way less relevant. Target a face-up monster in the field. Next time that monster would be destroyed by battle or card effect this turn. It is not destroyed. Also cannot attack this turn. Then banish 3. Mill 3. Like, if I'm using it on my opponent's turn, it's just to stop them from being able to attack. And if I'm using it on my turn or on my own monster on my opponent's turn, it's just because I'm trying to prevent it from being destroyed, so it just makes it a wall. But that doesn't really do much to like eliminate threats. It's more of like a stall card. So 2 and maybe even 1 would be fine. This little interaction here between these two is becoming one of my favorites. So triple golden droplets. This one lets your opponent draw 1 and then mill 4, and then dispel. Whenever your opponent adds a card from their hand outside of their draw phase, you can make them discard a random card and then mill 2. So you would activate the droplet. They're going to draw 1 and mill 4, so that's 5 out of the deck. Then you're going to activate the dispel on the add from the droplet for them to discard a random card and then mill 2. So that's 7 off the deck, plus you take 1 out of the hand that you gave them, more or less. But 7 out of the deck between these two cards, so super powerful. So if you had that between these also, you're now at 9. So these two cards with Deceit becomes a 9-card mill, and you still can keep activating more quick play spells, so it's pretty cool there. We got the 1 Terraforming to search the fountain. Reasoning and Monster Gate are kind of here for the same thing. So these, I'll make a note of, these are only in here because there is no monster hand trap in the deck currently. If you were going to like game 2 side in like your Ashes or Droll or whatever, you would definitely want to take these out, because hitting an Ash or a Droll and having that get summoned to your field just sucks. But for this current build, like this arrangement of monsters, these cards are pretty sweet. Like, I had to make a decision between cutting these two and the Imperms to play a hand trap that I might have liked better for going game 1, not knowing what you're playing against and getting stuck going second, but I just like the power that these two bring. So Reasoning, even if they call right and you don't get the special summon off of it, you're filling the graveyard with a bunch of your quick play spells, which is giving you the option to only recycle the ones that you need against the decks that you're playing against. So maybe you're playing against a deck that doesn't really play back row, and you mill these, just don't put them back, and then you don't have to see them in your hand, and they don't have to be a wasted spot in your deck. Monster Gate, kind of the same thing, except it isn't dependent on your opponent calling the right cards, so you're almost guaranteed to get a summon off of it. Typically I would use a Monster Gate on one of your fusion monsters, so you'll Runic Fusion Monster out into the extra monster zone, get its effect, and then Monster Gate to tribute it to start, looking. And then as long as it's one of these two, ideally this one obviously, but as long as it's one of these two, you're getting a pretty good monster out of it and doing the same thing as Reasoning. 1 Day Apiece, kind of just because it's a old school card that I really like and I wanted to play it and it fits in the deck okay. So you and your opponent both draw cards. Good for you on your draw, good for you on them losing a card out of their deck, and then you can't take damage, so it kind of extends the game an extra turn at the very least beyond that. Triple Fish Sonar, so this is just to get to that Karyushin, and then once you have the Karyushin, it's just to get to that Electric Jellyfish, and then beyond that, it's kind of not really useful anymore. I find myself using it the one time, and then beyond that, it's just like discard fodder for the Moonin and Hugin. You can't really afford to not have it because you really need that Karyushin lock as soon as possible, like ideally turn 1. Sea Stealth 2, this is your Yuumi on board. So this can be searched, all 3 of these can be searched by Karyushin's effect to search a Sea Stealth spell or trap during the main phase. So even if you don't open with the Yuumi, but you have a way to get to Karyushin, you would tribute summon it with Runic or whatever, and then search your Yuumi, and now you have the lockdown. So super easy there. Then it's also able to be targeted with the Sea Stealth attack to put it back on the field from the graveyard if it's popped. So that's why Sea Stealth attack is in there. So originally I had 2 or 3 of these, and then I cut it down to 2, and then I cut it down to 1 and put 2 of these in here, just because having extra copies of this in your hand are totally useless. Like, they do nothing for you, but having these as an option to pull it back, and then having the second and third effects beyond that ended up being a lot more useful. So once per turn you can banish a water monster you control until the end phase. This turn, face-up spell and traps you control cannot be destroyed by your opponent's card effects. So it protects your back row, which is massively important, your field spell and your Deceit and all that, and your Yuumi. and then it also can act as a way to like, so they target your Karyushin for an attack or with an effect that would kill it. You can just bounce it off the board for a turn, get it back in the end phase, and you keep your lock. And then the second effect, start a damage step if you're a water monster whose original level is 5 or higher, battles an opponent's monster, destroy that opponent's monster. Pretty much not relevant. You're not attacking with this deck. I guess if they attack your Karyushin, it can happen, but that's not really why we're playing it. But it is there. You know, it's something more than just having extra copies of this. And then the triple imperm. So the reason this is here is because you need something. If you get stuck going second, turn one, you don't know what you're playing against, you need something to try to slow that down. Because if you're trying to play against a big board, you're probably going to have a hard time getting through it because you don't have that many board breakers in the deck. So this is just to slow down on turn one what your opponent is able to do. I could definitely see you taking this out to play a board breaker like Dark Ruler No More, this guy down here, Forbidden Droplet, something else of that nature, just because, yeah, you got to be able to deal with something like that, because if you don't, this little lockdown play is way too easy to get stopped if you don't have a way to start getting some threats off the board. So that's why that's in there. But like I said before, if you wanted to play like some of these more powerful hand traps that are a little bit more versatile, I'd cut all three of the imperms, probably cut both of these, maybe even the one day, and then probably cut the Doomcrack, and then you'd fill up a bunch of hand traps from there. But I just don't really like playing decks that are that hand trap heavy, just because I like playing the different cards. But that's just me. I understand why you would do it. For the extra deck, these cards are all useless and get summoned almost never. They're in there because they can be made, and that's about it. This is probably the only interesting one. I thought it seemed kind of cool. This card is Link Summon. You can discard one card. During the end phase of this turn, add one continuous or field spell from your graveyard to your hand. You can only use the effect of Barricade Board Blocker once per turn. Face-up spells you control cannot be destroyed by your opponent's card effects. So, same as kind of some of the other cards. Like, you're just protecting your spells from getting popped. It has that ability to grab back your Fountain or your Deceit. I've summoned it once. It was okay. Yeah. And then for the Runic Monsters. So I got 2 Fred. He's not out in the TCG yet. When he does come out, I will have 2 Fred. He's kind of like a wall, so like when he's in the extra monster zone, when an attack is declared involving this card in the extra monster zone, you can banish the top 2 cards of your opponent's deck. Neither player takes battle damage from battles involving this card. If this card on the field is destroyed by a battle or card effect, you can target a Runic Quick Play in your graveyard, add it to your hand. Only use the effect of Fred once per turn. So you put them in your extra monster zone. So this is the one I'm summoning after I've already gotten my resources out of the deck. So I've got my Fountain, I've got my Deceit. I don't need to search other things. I don't need anything out of the graveyard. I'm summoning this guy, leaving him there. If they attack him, I take no damage, you mill 2, and I get to add one of my quick plays back, probably the tip if it's an option, to search something else. So he's just a nice little wall. Triple Jerry. Can't be destroyed by card effects. Special summon from the extra deck. You can target one non-quick play Runic in your graveyard, add it to your hand. When this card is destroyed by battle, you can target one card on the field, destroy it. So, similar thing. You can't just wipe this guy with a spell card. So he's kind of an annoyance. He gets you back one of your Fountain, your Deceit, and then once he gets killed, you can pop a card on the field. So he just does a lot for not very much card economy being sunk into it. Moonin, this guy searches your continuous spell, your Deceit. So you gotta discard one to add it to your hand, and then also he can boost you by 1,000 life points in the end phase of each turn. So that's not super relevant, but it kind of comes off like you just start stacking life points if you end up leaving this guy on the field. An additional effect, when your opponent activates a card or effect that targets a Runic card you control or a set card you control, you can banish this card you control, negate the activation. If you do, destroy that card. So just another, probably a little bit of a weaker, like it's more situational. I don't really use that effect too often. Really, the fusion monsters don't sit on the board for all that long the way I play the deck, but it exists and so it can be used. And then Hugin, this one searches the field spell. So discard a card, search your field spell. This is probably your most common turn 1 play, as you're going to use any of your Runic Quick Plays, summon this, discard one, grab the Fountain, activate the Fountain. Hopefully you have another Runic Quick Play spell to activate to then refill your hand. And then ideally you're getting a Karyushin out of this whole ordeal, tributing the Hugin to get the Karyushin lock on board. Also, if another card you control would be destroyed by a card effect, you can banish this card you control instead, and if this card on the field is destroyed by battle or card effect, it returns to the extra deck instead of going to the graveyard. So it kind of replenishes itself. You probably don't need 3 of them because of that, but there's not much else to play in the extra deck beyond the Runic spells, or the Runic fusion monsters anyway. And then for the side deck, pretty similar to the last side deck that we talked about with Runic. It's just a bunch of hand traps. You have that option to play a bunch of hand traps specific to whatever deck you're playing against, and then board breakers. So like you probably cut the Nibiru for Dark Rulers or Harpy Feathers Duster and some other back row hate or whatever you want. But that's the idea behind the extra deck. But that'll wrap up the deck list for this week. That was attempt number 5 at recording it. I don't know, I'm having such a hard time talking my way through this deck list this week. Hopefully it made sense. If it didn't, just ask questions down below. I'll answer. Make recommendations down below. I'd love to hear them. If you got an idea for what you want to see next week, I'm currently thinking Dinomorphia will be the deck list for next week. Unless you guys want to see something different, but leave that down below. But I want to thank you guys for hanging out with me for a few minutes here today, taking a look at this deck, and sharing your ideas. You guys have a great week.